Hey there, and welcome back to our channel. Today we're diving into another fascinating near-death experience and spiritual journey. We're going to hear from Evan Carter, who claims to have glimpsed the future during his brush with death, specifically a prediction about an attack on a US presidential candidate. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment with your name and where you're from. Now let's jump into Evan's story. My name is Evan Carter, and I'm here to share an extraordinary encounter that might sound incredible to some. I prefer to keep my personal details private to avoid being dismissed, but this is something I feel compelled to share. My experience with a near-death event has profoundly altered my view of reality. I've always considered myself a down-to-earth individual, dismissing supernatural or spiritual tales as fanciful. I was raised in a household that prized logic and evidence above all else. My father was a chemist, and my mother taught physics. Discussions about anything beyond scientific explanation were rare in our home, so what I'm about to describe was entirely unexpected for me. On a clear spring morning, I was driving to work as usual. The sun was shining, and the sky was perfectly blue, suggesting a promising day ahead. I was in my gray hatchback, cruising through the peaceful streets of Maplewood, a charming town where everyone seems to know each other. My destination was the office where I worked as a market analyst. Everything seemed normal until I reached a busy crossroads. The light was green for me, so I proceeded confidently, listening to an oldies radio station to get pumped for the day ahead. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a dark-colored SUV barreled through the red light on my right at breakneck speed. The collision was unavoidable. I remember the thunderous sound of metal crumpling, glass shattering, and my body being violently jolted within the car. The impact was so intense that my vehicle spun several times before finally coming to a halt. I experienced sharp pain throughout my head and limbs, but my mind was oddly tranquil. It was then that I had this surreal sensation of floating outside my own body. From above, it felt like I was watching a film, seeing my own bloodied, motionless form trapped in the wrecked car. People around were panicking, screaming for help, and paramedics rushed to the scene. I heard one of them urgently shouting, "We need to get him out of here quickly," as they worked to free me from the wreckage. Amid the chaos, I noticed the anguish on people's faces. A man in a tan coat was frantically speaking on his phone, likely calling for further medical assistance, while a woman clutching a young child was sobbing and pointing towards my car. It was then that I sensed something peculiar was occurring. I didn't feel any pain or fear, just an odd sense of peace and a growing curiosity about what was next. Despite my body lying still and lifeless, my consciousness seemed detached and calm. I was then drawn through a tunnel of radiant light. The journey was smooth and soothing, as if guided by an unseen force. There was no sound, only a profound silence that enveloped everything around me. When I emerged on the other side, I found myself in an environment reminiscent of ancient Greece or Rome, with pristine white marble structures and an otherworldly tranquility. The air was fresh and sweet, and the sunlight bathed everything in a magical glow. I was in a vast plaza, surrounded by grand columns and statues of mythological beings. The colors were more vivid than anything I had ever witnessed, and there was an overwhelming sense of purity and harmony in the atmosphere. The people around me were dressed in garments reminiscent of ancient togas and tunics, moving with a serene grace as if perpetually in a state of peace. Three beings materialized before me, radiating a serene and powerful aura. Their faces were obscured by a gentle, luminous glow that seemed to embody peace and wisdom. They appeared almost ethereal, with a translucent quality that filled me with profound awe. One of these figures moved closer to me, and though we exchanged no words, I felt a question reverberate in my mind. "Do you wish to see what comes next?" Unable to resist my overwhelming curiosity, I nodded in agreement. The figures led me across the plaza to a pristine white chamber devoid of any furnishings. The only light seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, creating an atmosphere of complete silence and unshakable tranquility. Suddenly the scene shifted, and I found myself at my own funeral. Friends and family gathered to mourn my passing, and the sight was incredibly painful. I wanted to cry out to them that I was all right, but no sound emerged. He was a great man, a loyal friend, I heard my closest friend, Jack, say as he struggled to hold back tears. We will miss him. My wife, Sarah, stood beside the casket, holding our daughter Lily's hand. Their faces were etched with profound sorrow, and the sight of their grief was unbearable. I tried to approach them, but an invisible barrier seemed to prevent me from reaching out or making any contact. Back in the White Chamber, one of the figures informed me that I needed to return to fulfill my soul's purpose. My body was too damaged, but they had a solution. I would be sent to a parallel universe where I would survive the accident. Although they did not elaborate on the details of this soul contract, they assured me that I would be able to complete it. You have a mission to accomplish, Evan, one of the figures said, their voice like a soft echo in my mind. There are still things you need to do and people you need to assist. I wanted to inquire further to understand what this mission entailed, but before I could ask, I felt a powerful force pulling me back. The tunnel of light reappeared, drawing me back to my reality. As I traversed the space between the two realms, I was enveloped by a vision of the future, vibrant and awe-inspiring. An intense light surrounded me, filling every part of my being with warmth and a sense of peace and unity, unlike anything I had ever felt before. The light seemed to elevate me to a vantage point where I could view the entire planet with an unprecedented clarity. Earth glowed with a golden radiance, pulsating with life, as if the planet itself were breathing in unison. It was as though every living being was harmonized to a single, universal frequency. A profound sense of peace and unity enveloped me, something that felt utterly foreign in my daily life. I observed conflicts dissolving, nations and cultures merging in cooperation and mutual understanding. The cities I recognized had undergone a remarkable transformation. Skyscrapers were now draped in lush greenery, creating vertical gardens that purified the air and provided habitats for wildlife. The streets buzzed with cheerful interactions, replacing the clamor of car traffic with the quiet hum of eco-friendly vehicles. Many people preferred walking or cycling. In a central plaza of a bustling metropolis, I saw a global assembly in session. Individuals from diverse backgrounds, different races, ages, and cultures sat in open-air circles, discussing solutions to global issues with calm and respect. Advanced devices facilitated communication, instantly translating languages and fostering a palpable sense of collaboration and shared purpose. This is the future that awaits, a gentle voice resonated in my mind. You have a part to play in guiding others toward this transformation. Education had also evolved significantly. Traditional classrooms had given way to interactive learning environments where augmented reality allowed students to delve into concepts immersively. Teachers now acted more as guides than instructors, supporting students on their paths of discovery and personal growth. Education was universally accessible, breaking down barriers of location and financial status. The advancements in medicine were astounding. I saw clinics where once untreatable diseases were now managed with ease. Genetic therapies and nanomedicine enabled tissue regeneration and cures for illnesses that had previously plagued humanity. Aging appeared to have been significantly slowed, and health was universally recognized as a fundamental right. There was a strong focus on prevention and holistic wellness, with health centers blending traditional practices and cutting-edge scientific advancements. Clean energy had become the standard, replacing polluting sources with renewables like solar, wind, and geothermal. Cities operated on smart grids that optimized energy use and minimized waste. Homes were self-sustaining, equipped with rainwater collection and purification systems, solar panels, and vertical gardens for growing fresh produce. One of the most striking elements of this vision was humanity's relationship with nature. I saw forests being rejuvenated, rivers being restored, and wildlife returning to habitats once ravaged by human activity. Urban areas were filled with parks and nature reserves where people and animals coexisted harmoniously. Children played outside, learning from an early age about the importance of environmental protection and respect. A particularly vivid image was of a grand global event occurring in September 2026. Millions of people gathered in squares, parks, and open spaces around the globe, celebrating a new era of peace and unity. There was music, dancing, and uplifting speeches, and the atmosphere was charged with joy and hope. Leaders from every nation spoke with a unified voice about the significance of cooperation and equality. Initiatives were launched to eliminate poverty and ensure access to basic necessities for everyone. Advanced technology facilitated communication and knowledge exchange, always with an emphasis on ethics and collective well-being. "This is the change that is approaching," the gentle voice in my mind reiterated. "You have a role in preparing others for this transformation." The vision filled me with hope and determination, and I knew I had to contribute in some way to help humanity reach this remarkable future. As the vision began to fade and I felt the pull of the tunnel drawing me back, the brilliant light dissipated and I began to regain awareness of my physical body. I came to with a jolt, disoriented and confused, awakening in a hospital room. The harsh fluorescent lights above were blinding, and the cacophony of beeping monitors and machinery was overwhelming after the serene silence I had just experienced. I attempted to move, but my body felt sore and frail, making everything seem like a distant dream. Yet the memories of my encounter were vivid and clear in my mind. I lay in a hospital bed with crisp white sheets, feeling the prick of IV needles in my arms. The antiseptic scent in the room was strong and unsettling. As I glanced around, I noticed I was in a private room with large windows letting in sunlight. The walls were painted a calming shade of blue, likely intended to soothe patients. A vase of fresh flowers on a small table beside the bed offered a touch of comfort. A nurse entered the room and greeted me with a warm smile. "Welcome back, Mr. Carter. You're safe now. You were in a serious accident, but you're out of danger." I tried to reply, but my throat was dry and no words came out. The nurse, noticing my struggle, gently handed me a glass of water and helped me drink. The cool liquid sliding down my throat was a welcome relief. "You're at Maplewood Central Hospital," the nurse continued, her tone reassuring. "You've been unconscious for a few days, but the doctors are hopeful about your recovery." As she spoke, my mind was flooded with questions and concerns. The memories of my near-death experience and the vision of the future were still fresh, and I needed to understand their significance and how they would impact my life. Just then, Sarah, my wife, walked in. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, but when she saw me awake, a wave of relief washed over her. She rushed to my side, gripping my hand tightly. "Evan, you're back," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We were so worried we might lose you." "Sarah," I managed to whisper, feeling tears well up in my eyes. "I saw incredible things." She embraced me gently, being careful not to cause any more discomfort. "You're here with us now, and that's what matters," she said softly. "We'll get through this together." Over the next few days, my recovery progressed slowly but steadily. The hospital was equipped with all the latest amenities to ensure patient comfort. My room was regularly attended by attentive nurses who monitored my vital signs and administered pain relief. Friends and family came to visit, bringing flowers, cards, and words of encouragement. Mark, my best friend, was a frequent visitor. He stood by me through the toughest moments, trying to lift my spirits with jokes and stories. "You really had us worried, man," he said during one of his visits, "but it's great to see you on the mend." Talking to Mark and the other visitors helped keep my mind occupied, but I couldn't shake off thoughts of my experience. The visions, the figures. It all felt so real. When I had enough strength, I began to share my experiences with Emily and Mark, trying to make sense of everything. "I was in a place that felt like ancient Greece," I started, as Emily and Mark sat by my bedside. "There were these figures who showed me my own funeral and told me I had to come back to fulfill a soul contract." Emily looked at me with a mix of concern and curiosity. "Caleb, what do you think this means?" she asked. "I'm not sure," I replied, shaking my head. But the vision of the future I saw felt so vivid. I saw a more united and better world, and they said I have a role to play in that. Mark stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Maybe you've been given a mission, Caleb, something you need to do to help bring about this change." These conversations helped me process what had happened, but they also heightened my sense of urgency. I felt a strong need to do something, though I wasn't clear on what that was yet. As I continued to physically recover, my mind was constantly engaged in trying to unravel the mystery of my soul contract and how I could contribute to the future I had seen. The doctors were impressed with my progress. "You're incredibly fortunate, Mr. Carter," Dr. Harris, one of the doctors overseeing my treatment, told me. "The damage was severe, but your recovery is ahead of our expectations." During physical therapy, I began to rebuild my strength and mobility. Each step was a small victory, each movement a reminder of my second chance at life. Although the physical pain gradually diminished, my quest for answers continued to drive me forward. The nights were particularly challenging. In the stillness and darkness, memories of my experience would flood back with intensity. I could see myself once again in that tunnel of light, feel the presence of those ethereal figures, and hear their words echoing in my mind. The weight of the responsibility they had placed on me was beginning to take hold, and I knew I couldn't just brush off what had happened. Eventually, I was able to return home. Emily and our son, Jake, did everything they could to make me feel comfortable and supported. Yet home, once a sanctuary of safety and comfort, now felt a little different. Every corner seemed to hold memories of a time when life was simpler, before the accident, before the vision of the future. "Welcome back, Dad," Jake exclaimed, wrapping me in a tight hug. His eyes sparkled with joy and relief. "I'm back, champ," I replied, trying to conceal the physical pain that still lingered. "And I have a lot to tell you." As the days passed and I tried to slip back into my routine, I began to notice something unsettling. The world around me felt slightly out of sync with my memories. Small, seemingly insignificant details started to stand out, as if I were living in a slightly altered version of the reality I once knew. These feelings of strangeness and disconnection made me increasingly restless. One of the first oddities I noticed was while watching television with Emily. We were watching a talk show when a commercial came on, and it instantly caught my attention. It was an ad for a new movie starring an actor who, in my memory, had passed away several years ago. I looked over at Emily, hoping she'd notice the same strangeness, but she seemed perfectly normal, casually commenting on the quality of the film. "Did you see that commercial?" I asked, trying to keep the anxiety out of my voice. "Yeah, it looks interesting, doesn't it?" she replied, completely unfazed. "But wasn't that actor dead?" I pressed, my mind racing to make sense of what I was seeing. Emily frowned, concern flashing across her face. "Caleb, are you sure you're okay? That actor has been alive for years. You must be mixing him up with someone else." The restlessness inside me grew stronger. I began to notice other peculiarities around me. When I visited the grocery store, I observed that some familiar brands and products had different names or simply weren't available at all. Books I'd read, songs I'd listened to, everything seemed slightly off. One of the most startling discoveries was finding out that a public figure I distinctly remembered passing away in 1992, Mr. D, was actually alive and actively appearing in new TV shows. I was utterly floored. I recall sitting on the couch, watching a recent interview with him, completely unable to wrap my mind around it. "Did you know Mr. D is still alive?" I asked Emily, trying to process this bizarre revelation. "Of course he is. Why are you so shocked?" she responded, genuinely puzzled by my reaction. These discrepancies were unsettling, leaving me in a constant state of doubt about what was real. I became obsessed with finding answers, spending hours online, diving into articles, watching videos, and engaging in discussions on forums about theories concerning alternate realities and parallel universes. Another major shock hit me when I stumbled upon significant alterations in the political history of the United States. While watching a documentary about U.S. presidents, I noticed something was amiss. In this version of history, President Turner served 2 terms, while in my original timeline, he had only served 1. Reagan, who in my original memory resigned due to illness after 1 term, here had served from 1987 to 1993, completing his full term. These discoveries left me questioning everything I thought I knew. In my original timeline, President Clinton was impeached in 1998, and Al Gore took over until 2000. Nelson Mandela, who I remembered as a revered global leader and the president of South Africa, had died in prison in 1985 in my original world. These inconsistencies felt like mismatched pieces of a puzzle that wouldn't fit together, and it left me questioning whether my near-death experience had somehow transported me to a different reality. The overwhelming sense that I was living in a world that wasn't quite mine started to consume me. I found myself confiding more and more in my friend Dan. He was one of the few people I felt I could talk to without fearing that I was losing my mind. One evening, as we sat in my study, surrounded by stacks of books and scattered papers, I tried to articulate what I was feeling. Dan, do you ever feel like something is fundamentally off, but you can't quite figure out what it is? I asked, hoping he could offer some insight. Dan looked at me intently. Chris, after what you've gone through, it's natural to feel disoriented, but the details you're describing are so specific. It sounds like something beyond just a traumatic experience. Exactly. Everything feels the same, but at the same time, it's all different. It's like I'm living in an alternate version of my own life, I said, frustrated by my inability to make sense of it all. Dan nodded thoughtfully. Maybe your experience has opened a door to something greater. It's possible that you're here for a reason, to warn us about something, or to fulfill a particular purpose. These conversations with Dan helped me process the situation, but they also heightened my sense of urgency. I knew I had to do something, but I still didn't know what that was. As I continued to heal physically, my mind was constantly racing, trying to make sense of the mystery surrounding my soul contract and how I was supposed to contribute to the future I'd seen. The nights were particularly challenging. In the stillness and darkness, memories of my experience would flood back with startling intensity. I could see myself again in that tunnel of light, feel the presence of those figures, and hear their words echoing in my mind. The weight of responsibility began to settle in, and I knew I couldn't simply dismiss what had happened. Eventually, I was able to return home. Lisa and our son, Max, did everything they could to make me feel comfortable and supported. Home, which had always been a sanctuary for me, now felt slightly different. Every corner seemed to carry memories of a simpler time, before the accident, before that vision of the future. "Welcome back, Dad," Max said, hugging me tightly, his eyes bright with relief. "I'm back, buddy," I replied, trying to conceal the lingering physical pain, "and I've got a lot to share with you." As I tried to adjust to this new reality, my quest for answers only deepened. I decided to reach out to others who might have gone through similar experiences, hoping they could offer some insight or guidance. That's when I met Sarah, a researcher specializing in paranormal phenomena, with a strong belief in parallel universes and alternate realities. Sarah was a driven and insightful woman, passionate about uncovering the mysteries of the unknown. She was fascinated by my story and helped me map out the differences between the two realities. We spent countless hours comparing historical events, news stories, and even everyday details, trying to grasp the scope of these changes. "Alex, these discrepancies aren't just random," Sarah said during one of our analysis sessions. "It seems like you've actually been transported to an alternate version of our reality." The question that lingered in my mind was why. This question echoed constantly because I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a purpose behind everything that had happened. What was the meaning of it all, and what was I supposed to do next? The search for answers became an obsession, a burning desire to understand and fulfill the role I had been assigned. The differences between the realities made me deeply question what was happening in my original reality. What had become of my friends and family there? Were they living their lives as if nothing had changed, never realizing that I was gone? Or had my absence created an inexplicable void for them? During the long days of recovery, I spent countless hours reflecting on what it meant to exist in a parallel reality. Each small difference I uncovered seemed to pull me further away from the life I had known. I felt a strange mix of longing and disorientation, as if I were trapped in a dream from which I couldn't awaken. Lisa noticed my unease and tried to comfort me. "Maybe this is like a rebirth, Alex," she suggested gently. "You've been given a second chance. Maybe that's a blessing in disguise." Her words were comforting, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that something much larger was at play. The figures I had encountered during my near-death experience mentioned a soul contract that I needed to fulfill. But what did that really mean? What was in that contract, and why was it so vital that I returned to complete it? "Lisa, I feel like there's something important I need to do, but I have no idea what it is," I confessed one night as we lay in bed. "Those figures, they said I had a mission. She looked at me with a mix of understanding and tenderness. "You might not know what that mission is just yet, but you can find out as you go. The key is not to give up searching." Her words offered a new perspective, and I resolved to keep searching for my purpose. As I sought to understand my role, I also decided to help others share their own stories. Perhaps, together, we could find the patterns and connections I was looking for. I began to participate in support groups and online forums for people who had experienced near-death experiences, NDEs. The stories I encountered were nothing short of fascinating, and in many cases, eerily similar to my own. One particular account caught my attention. A man named Andrew described an experience where he encountered Ezekiel's wheel and was taken into a white room, remarkably similar to what I had seen. Intrigued, I decided to reach out to him, hoping he could shed some light on what we were both going through. "Andrew, my name is Alex Moore," I wrote in an email. "I read your account of your experience, and it resonated deeply with me. I've been through something very similar and would like to discuss it with you." Andrew replied quickly, expressing a keen interest in connecting. We arranged a video call to share our experiences. During our conversation, I realized that while our stories had many commonalities, there were also significant differences. "Alex, Ezekiel's wheel is an ancient symbol often linked with spiritual visions and prophecies," Andrew explained. "My experience was incredibly vivid, and I believe I was chosen to witness these things for a specific purpose." "I feel the same way," I responded, feeling a deep sense of connection with him. "But I'm still trying to understand what I'm supposed to do with these visions." Andrew smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. "Maybe our mission is simply to share what we've seen and help others prepare for what's coming." This conversation gave me a renewed sense of purpose. I realized I needed to share my story with a broader audience, hoping it might inspire others to discover their own path and purpose. I began writing about my experience, detailing every aspect of the visions I had and the differences I'd noticed between the realities. As I wrote, I felt a mix of relief and determination, as if each word was helping me process what had happened and readying me for whatever lay ahead. Lisa and Sam were my constant pillars of support, encouraging me to keep going, even when doubts threatened to overwhelm me. "You're doing something important, Alex," Lisa said one evening as she reviewed one of my drafts. "Your story has the potential to help a lot of people." Her words gave me the encouragement I needed to keep sharing my experience, both online and in person, at meetings with others who had gone through similar events. Each new account I heard from others who had lived through similar stories only strengthened my resolve to continue searching for answers. The messages of support I received constantly reminded me that I wasn't alone on this journey. Many people shared their own inexplicable experiences with me, often mentioning Ezekiel's wheel, which brought me a sense of comfort and a bit more clarity about the unknowable aspects of divine will. Now, as we stand in July 2024, I believe we're just a few months away from the monumental shift I saw in my vision. I'm sharing my story now because I believe it's essential for people to be prepared. The changes that I foresee could alter our reality in ways we can't yet fully grasp. My goal is to inspire and guide others, helping them understand and embrace the transformations that lie ahead. This is where I conclude my report for now, a journey of discovery, challenge, and transformation. I hope my story encourages others to find their purpose and unite for a better future. What are your thoughts on this incredible story? Share your opinions in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Make sure to activate the notification bell so you won't miss any new videos. Together, let's spread hope and awareness that there is more to life than what meets the eye. I'm Caleb Winslow, and I experienced something extraordinary. I had a near-death experience that revealed a future event, including an attack on a U.S. presidential candidate. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so now. Leave a comment with your name and city, and now, let's dive into my testimony. My name is Caleb Winslow, and I'm here to share an experience that might seem unbelievable to many. I've chosen to keep my identity somewhat private to avoid being dismissed as crazy, but what I went through is something I feel compelled to share. For as long as I can remember, I've been a practical person. I've never given much thought to the supernatural or spiritual stories. I grew up in a family where logic and reason were highly valued. My father was an engineer, and my mother was a science teacher. Discussions about religion or anything that couldn't be scientifically explained were rare in our household. So, what I'm about to tell you is something I never imagined could happen to me. It was a spring morning like any other, and I was on my way to work. The sun was shining brightly in a clear, cloudless sky, promising a beautiful and productive day. I drove my silver sedan through the quiet streets of Oak Ridge, a small, cozy town where everyone seemed to know everyone. I was on my way to the office where I worked as a financial analyst, following my usual routine. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary until I approached a busy intersection. The traffic light was green, so I continued driving, feeling assured by the signal. The radio was tuned to a local station playing classic 80s rock, a soundtrack to get me energized for the day ahead. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a large black SUV appeared on my right, barreling through the red light at full speed. The collision was unavoidable. The next few moments were a blur of chaos, metal crunching, glass shattering, and my body being violently jolted inside the car. The force of the impact sent my car spinning uncontrollably before it finally came to a stop. I felt sharp pain in my head and limbs, but oddly, my mind remained calm. It was then that I experienced something utterly surreal. I found myself floating outside my body, watching the scene unfold as though I were a spectator in a movie. I could see my own body, bloody and motionless, trapped inside the mangled wreck of my car. People around me were in a state of panic, screaming for help as paramedics arrived on the scene. "Quick! We need to get him out of here!" one of the paramedics shouted as they worked frantically to free me from the wreckage. I observed the expressions of despair on the faces of those around me. A man in a brown jacket was urgently making a call, likely to emergency services, while a woman holding a small child was crying, pointing towards my car. Despite the horror of the situation, I didn't feel pain or fear, just an overwhelming sense of peace and a growing curiosity about what was to come. I was fully conscious but strangely detached from my physical body. The sight of my bloodied, motionless self should have been terrifying, yet all I felt was a serene calm. As my body lay there motionless, my consciousness was gently drawn into a tunnel of brilliant light. The sensation was soothing and peaceful, as if I were being guided by an invisible force. There was no sound, just a profound silence that enveloped everything around me. When I emerged on the other side, I found myself in a setting that reminded me of ancient Greece or Rome, with white marble buildings and an otherworldly tranquility that filled the air. The air was crisp and fragrant, and the sunlight bathed everything in a nearly magical glow. I found myself in a vast square surrounded by majestic columns and statues of mythological figures. The colors around me were more vivid than anything I had ever seen, and the atmosphere was infused with a sense of purity and harmony. The people walking nearby were dressed in attire reminiscent of togas and tunics from ancient times, moving with a calmness that suggested they were in a perpetual state of peace. Suddenly, 3 figures appeared before me, radiating a serene and powerful energy. Their faces were indistinct, cloaked in a soft light that exuded peace and wisdom. They seemed ethereal, almost translucent, and I felt a profound sense of awe in their presence. One of the figures approached me, and though no words were spoken, I sensed a question resonate in my mind. "Do you want to see what happens next?" I nodded, unable to resist the intense curiosity that filled me. The figures led me across the square to a white room devoid of furniture, where the light seemed to emanate from the very walls. The silence was absolute, yet the feeling of serenity remained undisturbed. Suddenly the scene shifted, and I found myself witnessing my own funeral. Friends and family were gathered, mourning my loss. The sight was both painful and heartbreaking, and I desperately wanted to tell them that I was okay, but no sound would come from my mouth. "He was a good man, a loyal friend," I heard my best friend Peter say as he struggled to hold back tears. "We'll miss you." My wife, Sarah, stood by the casket, holding the hand of our daughter, Lily. Their faces were etched with sorrow, and the pain in their eyes was unbearable to see. I tried to move closer, to comfort them, but an invisible barrier seemed to prevent me from reaching out to them. Back in the White Room, one of the figures explained that I needed to return to fulfill my soul contract, but my body was too damaged. The solution was to send me to a parallel universe where I would survive the accident. They didn't elaborate on the contents of the soul contract, but they assured me that I would fulfill it. "You have a mission to complete, Nathan," one of the figures said, their voice echoing softly in my mind. "There are people you still need to help, things you still need to do." I wanted to ask more questions, to understand better what this mission entailed, but before I could speak, I felt a powerful force pulling me back. The tunnel of light reappeared, and I was being drawn back into my reality, though something inside me knew that nothing would ever be the same. As I passed through the tunnel between the two realities, I was overwhelmed by a vision of the future that was both awe-inspiring and overwhelming. I was enveloped in an intense light that filled every part of my being, warming me and giving me a profound sense of peace and unity unlike anything I had ever felt before. This light seemed to elevate me to a vantage point from where I could see the entire planet with a clarity that transcended the physical senses. The earth was bathed in a golden light, pulsating and alive, as if the entire planet was breathing in harmony, with every living being attuned to the same peaceful frequency. I experienced a profound sense of peace and unity among people, something that seemed impossible in my everyday reality. I witnessed conflicts dissolving as different nations and cultures came together in harmony and mutual understanding. The urban landscape had transformed dramatically. The familiar cities were now dreamlike, with skyscrapers adorned in lush vegetation, forming vertical gardens that purified the air and created habitats for wildlife. The bustling noise of car traffic had given way to quiet, sustainable vehicles, and many preferred walking or cycling. In a central square of a major city, a global assembly was underway. People from all races, ages, and cultures sat in open-air circles, discussing global issues with calm and respect. Advanced translation devices facilitated seamless communication, allowing ideas to flow freely and fostering a palpable sense of collaboration and shared purpose. "This is the change that is coming," a soft voice whispered in my mind. "You have a role to play in preparing people for this transformation." Educational institutions had also evolved. Traditional classrooms were replaced by interactive learning environments, where augmented reality allowed students to explore concepts in an immersive way. Teachers had become guides, facilitating students' journeys of discovery and personal growth. Education was now accessible to all, regardless of location or financial status. The advances in medicine were astonishing. Clinics treated diseases once deemed incurable with ease. Genetic therapies and nanomedicine enabled tissue regeneration and cures for ailments that had once plagued humanity. Aging appeared to be significantly slowed, and health was considered a fundamental right for everyone. There was a strong focus on prevention and holistic wellness, with health centers blending traditional practices with cutting-edge scientific innovations. Clean energy had become the norm. Polluting energy sources were abandoned in favor of renewable options like solar, wind, and geothermal power. Cities were powered by smart grids that optimized energy consumption and minimized waste. Homes were self-sustainable, featuring rainwater collection and purification systems, solar panels, and vertical gardens for growing fresh food. One of the most remarkable aspects of this vision was how people interacted with nature. I witnessed forests being revitalized, rivers being cleansed, and wildlife returning to once destroyed habitats. Urban areas were transformed into vibrant parks and nature reserves where humans and animals coexisted harmoniously. Children played outside, learning from a young age the importance of protecting and respecting the environment. One of the most striking visions was of a global event set for September 2024, where millions gathered in squares, parks, and open spaces worldwide to celebrate this new era of peace and unity. Music, dancing, and uplifting speeches filled the air with joy and hope. I saw leaders from every nation speaking as one, emphasizing unity and cooperation. There was a strong focus on equality and social justice, with new initiatives aimed at eradicating poverty and ensuring that everyone had access to basic resources for a dignified life. Advanced technology connected people and facilitated the exchange of knowledge, always with an emphasis on ethics and collective well-being. "This is the change that is coming," the soft voice repeated. "You have a role to play in preparing people for this transformation." The vision filled me with hope and determination. I understood that I had to contribute in some way to help humanity reach this promising future. As the vision began to fade, I felt the pull of the tunnel drawing me back. The brilliant light dimmed, and I started to regain awareness of my physical body. I woke up in a hospital room, feeling confused and disoriented. The harsh fluorescent lights above were blinding, and the cacophony of beeping monitors and machinery was overwhelming. After the tranquil silence of my vision, it felt as though I was waking from a distant dream. My body was sore and weak, and I could feel the IV needles in my arms, lying under the cold white sheets of the hospital bed. The antiseptic smell in the room was overpowering and unsettling. As I took in my surroundings, I noticed that I was in a private room with large windows letting in the sunlight. The walls were painted a calming shade of blue, likely to soothe patients. A small vase of fresh flowers on a nearby table offered a modest comfort. A nurse entered and greeted me with a reassuring smile. "Welcome back, Mr. Winslow," she said, her voice gentle. "You're safe now. You were in a serious accident, but you're out of danger." I tried to respond, but my throat was too dry for words. The nurse noticed my struggle and kindly brought me a glass of water, helping me take a sip. The cool liquid provided much-needed relief. "You're at Springfield Central Hospital," she continued, her tone soothing. "You've been unconscious for a few days, but the doctors are hopeful about your recovery." As she spoke, my mind raced with questions and concerns. The memories of my near-death experience and the vision of the future were still vivid in my mind, as if they had just occurred. I needed to make sense of it all and figure out how it would impact my future. Emily, my wife, arrived shortly after, her eyes red and swollen from crying. The moment she saw me awake, relief flooded her face. She rushed to my side, gripping my hand tightly. "Caleb, you're back," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We were so afraid we might lose you." "Emily," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I saw things, amazing things." She hugged me carefully, mindful of my injuries. "You're here now, and that's what matters. We'll get through this together." In the days that followed, my recovery was gradual but steady. The hospital provided modern amenities to ensure patient comfort. I was regularly visited by attentive nurses who monitored my vitals and administered pain relief. Friends and family came by, bringing flowers, cards, and supportive words. Mark, my best friend, was a frequent visitor. He did his best to lift my spirits with jokes and stories. "You gave us quite a scare," he said during one visit, trying to lighten the mood, "but it's great to see you're on the mend." Talking with Mark and the other visitors helped occupy my mind, but I couldn't shake off the thoughts about my extraordinary experience. The visions I experienced, the figures I encountered, it all felt incredibly real. Once I regained enough strength, I began to share my experiences with Emily and Mark, hoping to make sense of it all. I described to them the place I had been, which seemed like ancient Greece, and the figures who had shown me my own funeral, explaining that I was sent back to fulfill a soul contract. Emily listened with a mix of concern and curiosity. "Caleb, what do you think this means?" "I'm not sure," I admitted, shaking my head. But the vision of the future felt so vivid. I saw a better, more unified world, and they said I have a role to play in that. Mark pondered my words, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "Maybe you've been given a mission, a specific task to help bring about this change." These conversations helped me begin to process what had happened, yet they also heightened my sense of urgency. I knew I needed to do something, though I wasn't sure what. As I continued to recover physically, my mind was constantly engaged in trying to unravel the mystery of my soul contract and how I could contribute to the future I had seen. The doctors were impressed with my recovery. Dr. Harris, one of my physicians, remarked, "You were incredibly fortunate, Mr. Winslow. The damage was severe, but your recovery is progressing faster than we anticipated." During physical therapy, I focused on rebuilding my strength and mobility. Each step forward was a small victory, each movement a reminder of my second chance at life. Although the physical pain gradually diminished, my search for answers continued to dominate my thoughts. Nights were particularly challenging. The silence and darkness would often bring back the memories of my experience with renewed intensity. I would relive the tunnel of light, feel the presence of the figures, and hear their words echoing in my mind. The weight of the responsibility was settling in, and I knew I couldn't ignore the significance of what had happened. Eventually, I was able to return home. Emily and our son Jake did everything they could to ensure I felt comfortable and supported. My home, once a haven of safety and familiarity, now seemed subtly altered. Every corner reminded me of a simpler time, before the accident and before my vision of the future. "Welcome back, Daddy," Jake said, hugging me tightly, his eyes filled with joy and relief. "I'm back, champ," I replied, trying to mask the physical discomfort I still felt, "and I've got a lot to share with you." As the days went by, and I attempted to resume my routine, I began to notice that the world around me felt slightly out of sync with my memories. Small, seemingly trivial details began to catch my attention, as if I were living in a slightly altered version of reality. The feeling of disconnection and strangeness grew more pronounced. One of the first things that stood out was the television. While Emily and I were watching a talk show, a commercial came on for a new movie featuring an actor who, according to my memories, had passed away years ago. I looked at Emily, hoping she would sense the oddity, but she seemed perfectly unfazed, commenting on the quality of the film. "Did you see that commercial?" I asked, trying to keep the anxiety out of my voice. "Yes, it looks interesting, doesn't it?" she replied, not noticing anything out of the ordinary. "But shouldn't that actor be dead?" I pressed, my mind racing to make sense of it all. Emily's expression turned to concern. "Caleb, are you okay? That actor has been alive for years. You must be mixing him up with someone else." The feeling of restlessness grew within me. I started to scrutinize everything more closely. During a trip to the supermarket, I noticed that some brands and products I was familiar with had different names or didn't seem to exist at all. Books I had read, songs I had heard, everything seemed slightly out of place. One of the most significant shocks came when I discovered that Mr. T, a public figure I clearly remembered having passed away in 1994, was alive and well, starring in new television shows. This revelation left me utterly stunned. I remember sitting on the couch, watching a recent interview with him, unable to believe what I was seeing. "Emily, did you know that Mr. T is still alive?" I asked, trying to make sense of this information. "Of course he always has been," she replied, genuinely confused. "Why are you so surprised?" These differences were deeply disturbing and left me constantly questioning the nature of reality. I began searching frantically for answers, spending hours on the internet, reading articles, watching videos, and participating in discussion forums about theories of alternative realities and parallel universes. Another jolt came when I uncovered significant changes in American political history while watching a documentary about U.S. presidents. I noticed discrepancies that contradicted my original timeline. President Carter had only one term in this reality, whereas I remembered him serving two. Reagan served from 1985 to 1991 here, completing his term, while in my timeline, he had resigned due to Alzheimer's. President Clinton was impeached in 1999 in my original timeline, and Al Gore took office until 2001. Here, Clinton's presidency extended beyond that event. Nelson Mandela was president of South Africa in this reality, but I remembered him having died in prison in 1987. These differences felt like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit together in my mind. The overwhelming sense of being out of place and living in a world that wasn't exactly mine intensified. I turned to Mark for support, one of the few people with whom I could share my concerns without feeling like I was losing my grip on reality. One day, as we sat in my home office surrounded by scattered books and documents, I tried to articulate my feelings to him. "Mark, something is really off," I began, feeling the weight of my confusion. "The world around me, things just don't match up with what I remember. History, people, everything seems altered. It's like I'm living in a different version of reality." Mark listened intently, his face a mixture of concern and curiosity. "It sounds like you're experiencing what some people describe as the Mandela effect," he said thoughtfully. where collective memories don't align with current realities. It's unsettling, but it might not be as far-fetched as it seems. His words provided a small measure of comfort, but the sense of disorientation remained. I knew I had to continue seeking answers and understanding, not only for myself, but for anyone else who might be experiencing something similar. Mark looked at me seriously. Caleb, after what you've been through, it's natural to feel out of place. But the changes you describe are very specific. It sounds like something beyond simple trauma. Exactly, I said. Everything feels the same but different at the same time, like I'm living in an alternate version of my own life. Mark nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps your experience has actually opened a door to something greater. It may be that you are here to warn us about something or to fulfill some purpose. His words gave me a glimmer of understanding, but also heightened my sense of urgency. I knew I needed to do something, but the exact nature of my role remained elusive. As I continued to recover physically, my mind was constantly racing, trying to unravel the mystery of my soul contract and my potential contribution to the future I had seen. The nights were particularly difficult. In the silence and darkness, memories of my experience came back with a vengeance. I would see myself in the tunnel of light, feel the presence of the figures, and hear their words echoing in my mind. The weight of responsibility was becoming more apparent, and I knew I couldn't ignore what had happened. Eventually, I managed to return home. Emily and our son Jake went out of their way to make me feel comfortable and supported. Home, once a place of safety and comfort, now felt slightly different. Every corner seemed to bring back memories of a simpler time before the accident and before the vision of the future. "Welcome back, Daddy," Jake said, hugging me tightly. His eyes sparkled with joy and relief. "I'm back, champ," I replied, trying to hide the physical pain I still felt. "And I have a lot to tell you." As I tried to adapt to this new reality, my search for answers continued. I decided to seek out other people who had experienced similar phenomena, hoping to find some explanation or guidance. That's how I found Hannah, a researcher of paranormal phenomena who believed in parallel universes and alternative realities. Hannah was a determined and intelligent woman with a passion for unraveling the mysteries of the unknown. She was intrigued by my story and agreed to help me map the differences between the two realities. We spent hours comparing historical events, news, and even everyday details, trying to understand the magnitude of the changes. Hannah's insights and research added a new dimension to my understanding. She introduced me to various theories about parallel universes, the Mandela effect, and even the possibility of shifting realities due to significant events or decisions. Her analytical approach helped me frame my experiences within a broader context, though it didn't fully resolve the disorienting sense of living in an altered version of my own life. Despite the ongoing confusion, I found solace in the idea that my experience might have a purpose beyond my understanding. Every conversation with Hannah and Mark, every piece of research, and every moment of reflection brought me a step closer to accepting and potentially fulfilling the role I had been given. "Caleb, these discrepancies are not random," Hannah said during one of our analysis sessions. "It appears that you have actually been transported to an alternate version of our reality." The weight of her words settled heavily on my shoulders. The question of why this had happened to me and what I should do next echoed relentlessly in my mind. The search for answers became an obsession, a burning desire to understand and fulfill the role I had been assigned. Every new difference between this reality and my previous one made me question what had happened in my original reality. What had become of my friends and family there? Were they living their lives normally, unaware of my absence, or had my disappearance created an inexplicable void? The long days of recovery were spent in deep reflection. Each discrepancy I discovered seemed to pull me further away from the life I once knew, leaving me with a mixture of longing and strangeness. It felt as though I were living in a dream from which I couldn't wake up. Emily noticed my unease and tried to comfort me. "Caleb, maybe what you went through was a rebirth of sorts. You were given a second chance, and that might be a blessing in disguise." Her words were soothing, but they didn't quite quell the feeling that something larger was at play. The figures I encountered during my near-death experience had mentioned a soul contract that I needed to fulfill. But what did this really mean? What was the content of that contract, and why was it so crucial that I returned to complete it? One night, as we lay in bed, I confided in Emily. "Emily, I feel like there's something I need to do, but I don't know what it is. Those figures, they said I had a mission." She looked at me with understanding and tenderness. "You may not yet know what this mission is, but you can find out along the way. The important thing is not to give up looking." Her words gave me a renewed sense of purpose. I realized that while I might not have all the answers yet, I could continue to seek them. I decided that in addition to exploring my own journey, I would help other people share their stories. Perhaps, through our collective experiences, we could uncover patterns and connections that might shed light on my mission. This decision led me to reach out to individuals who had also experienced unexplained phenomena or profound changes in their lives. I started hosting informal gatherings where people could share their stories and insights. These sessions became a source of comfort and mutual understanding. Listening to others, I began to notice recurring themes and ideas that resonated with my own experiences. As I continued my quest for meaning and connection, I kept a journal of my findings and reflections. Each entry became a step toward understanding my role in this new reality and the purpose behind my soul contract. The journey was far from over, but with Emily's support and the shared wisdom of those I met, I felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. I started participating in support groups and online forums for people who had near-death experiences, NDEs, hoping to find more insights and understanding. The stories I encountered were both fascinating and eerily similar to my own. One story in particular caught my attention. A man named Mason had reported seeing the Wheel of Ezekiel and being taken into a white room, much like the one I had experienced. Intrigued by the similarities, I decided to reach out to Mason. I wrote him an email. Mason responded quickly, expressing interest in a discussion. We arranged a video call to delve deeper into our experiences. During our conversation, it became clear that while there were many similarities, there were also significant differences. Mason described his encounter with the Wheel of Ezekiel, an ancient symbol often linked with spiritual visions and prophecies. He spoke with a sense of reverence, reflecting on how his experience felt both vivid and purposeful. "Caleb," Mason said thoughtfully, "Ezekiel's wheel is known for its complexity and depth in spiritual contexts. My experience felt like it was guiding me towards a specific understanding. I believe there was a reason I was shown these things." "I feel the same way," I responded, feeling a deep connection with Mason, "but I'm still grappling with what I'm supposed to do with these visions." Mason smiled warmly. "Maybe our mission is simply to share what we saw and help others prepare for what's to come. Sometimes the purpose of such experiences is to provide guidance and hope to those who need it." His words resonated with me, offering a new sense of direction. I resolved to share my story more broadly, hoping it would inspire others to find their own path and purpose. I began writing about my experience, meticulously detailing every aspect of the visions I had seen and the differences between the realities. As I wrote, I felt a profound mix of relief and determination. Each word on the page seemed to help me process what had happened and prepare me for the future. Emily and Jake were unwavering in their support, encouraging me to continue even when doubts threatened to overwhelm me. "You're doing something important, Caleb," Emily said one evening as we reviewed one of my drafts. "Your story can help a lot of people." Her encouragement was a vital source of strength. I persisted in sharing my experience both online and at in-person meetings with others who had similar stories. Each new account I heard and each message of support I received reinforced my commitment to this journey. Through these interactions, I began to see patterns and connections that furthered my understanding of the role I might play. The shared stories and collective wisdom offered solace and guidance, helping me to stay focused on my mission. The realization that I was part of a larger community of people seeking meaning and understanding provided a renewed sense of purpose. I began receiving messages of encouragement from individuals who had also experienced inexplicable phenomena. One of them referenced the Wheel of Ezekiel, which offered some solace and insight into the enigmatic aspects of divine intention. As we approach October 2024, only a few months remain before what I believe will be a monumental shift, one that I glimpsed in my visions. I'm sharing my story now because I think it's crucial for people to be ready. The changes on the horizon could reshape our reality in ways we can't yet fully comprehend. My aim is to inspire and guide, helping others grasp and embrace the forthcoming transformations. So I conclude my account for now. This journey is one of discovery, challenge, and profound transformation. I hope my narrative can motivate others to discover their own purpose and unite for a brighter future. What are your thoughts on this remarkable story? Please share your opinions in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell for updates on new videos. Let's spread hope and show that there's more to life than meets the eye.